Good evening and a very warm welcome to We the People. Has Pamela Anderson, Veena Malik or perhaps Dolly Bindras made the Information and Broadcasting Ministry nervous? This past week, the I&B Ministry suggested that several reality shows, in this particular case, Big Boss, the current season, and Rakhi Ka Insaf, were too raunchy for primetime bans. Of course, the High Court has intervened and put a temporary stay on that issue. But on the program today, we look at the wider questions. The strange new confessional culture, voyeuristic culture, exhibitionist culture that India seems completely entrapped by and swayed by, with people watching these shows yet damning them. Is that a paradox? Also, the government believed that these shows are not made for prime time, primarily because they believed that they were too adult. They should be aired only after 11 p.m. because our kids should not be watching these shows. But is that relevant in the age of YouTube and the internet, where censorship has become almost impossible? And should the government be playing nanny at all? Let me start with Dilip Cherian. Dilip, censorship per se is something that liberals don't like. We also would tend to argue that it's for parents and families to determine what their kids are comfortable watching. Do you believe the I&B Ministry in this particular case has overstretched its sort of do-gooderness, if I may put it like that?
I don't think so at all. In fact, this whole business of censorship is overhyped. You know, there's this worry that, you know, we're going to get into a censorious mood and government has no business being censor. That's to one side, and I think that's got to do with non-entertainment stuff. And I think I'm very clear that in news, this is not the same standard which ought to be followed. However, as far as the censoring is concerned, given the fact that you have at the moment a methodology by which you censor movies, where you take a choice about going to a movie hall and watching, and here you're bringing this kind of bad taste home. I'm not saying vile or vulgar, I'm just saying poor taste home at prime time. There is something wrong with it, and I think that it makes sense if entertainment programs also get a kind of certification as to whether it's universal viewing or whether parental guidance is worth watching.
So you're saying this is not censorship, this is merely applying to entertainment television the same parameters that are applied to cinema?
Which has been in place for a long time. It's acceptable, it's widely recognized as playing a useful function, which is why it has not been disbanded as yet. And as someone who sits on the censor board, I know the debates that go on and the discussions that take place, even though there are things to be criticized of that system too. So as far as I'm concerned, the I&B Ministry has done something extremely sensible by putting this in at a time when this was a matter of public discourse.
Fair enough. But Amit, you're the lawyer who actually managed to get a stay on this order. What Dilip seems to be saying is perfectly reasonable. Nobody's saying take this show off air. He's basically saying that even entertainment television needs a kind of, you know, how movies have ratings under parental guidance, adult, and so on, or for people under 18. We have these ratings in cinema. Why are we so up in arms and branding the government as a sort of would-be nanny when it comes to these shows?
Barkha, let's understand the core issue and why we filed this petition. There are the sort of order and the executive fiat that is issued on 17th says three things. It says this offends good taste and decency, but doesn't spell out how and what are the instances. The second thing it says it's not suitable for children. Doesn't say how, what are the incidences. And the third thing it does is says go and enforce this immediately. You are in the media business. You know programming is not an easy job, especially a primetime show. So the process is core, the process that the government has followed. I'm not really going to comment on how you can make the distinction between entertainment versus media. I don't think that's a fair distinction. That's versus news. I don't think that's a fair distinction. I think everything should be treated at the same level. And
including movies? Would you say movies should have no ratings?
I would think so. Let's see the evolution of movies also, Barkha. I had somebody tell me this morning that when Barsat was a film that was done in those years, in those decades, the censorship that was awarded to it was a certificate A. And you know why? Because the Ghungat was not there. Now, so therefore, the question that we must ask ourselves here is...
changing norms.
That's correct. Decency, morality, you know, these are subjective, they change with time. So therefore, to my mind, really, and this is my personal view, is that things have changed with time. Law needs to evolve with time. That's the core issue.